So I went from being this healthy third-year med student just down the street at UPenn Medical School to out of nowhere, my organs started shutting down. I mean, Jeff, I literally was as healthy as you could get, and then within just a couple weeks, felt more tired than I ever felt before. I had these enlarged lymph nodes, abdominal pain, ended up being hospitalized, and shortly thereafter learning that my liver, my kidneys, and my bone marrow were all shutting down for an unknown cause. We had no idea what the disease was. We didn't know it was killing me, but I got more and more sick until about 11 weeks into it, my doctors told my family that they were out of options and to say their final goodbyes to me, and a priest read me my last rites when I was 25 years old.
This is Dr. David Fajgenbaum. At 25 years old, he was left for dead, plagued by a disease that no one really understood. What happened next, you could argue, unlocked a breakthrough that affected the future of medicine.
But thankfully, right around that time was when a biopsy was done, a lymph node biopsy, and the diagnosis came back of idiopathic multicentric Castleman disease, this really horrible, deadly condition where your immune system attacks your vital organs until you die. And my doctors tried a combination of 7 drugs that weren't made for Castleman's. They were made for lymphomas and myeloma, and just sort of a last-ditch, like Hail Mary. They gave me the 7 chemos, and they worked. They saved my life. But unfortunately, I had a number of relapses after those medicines. And when I had my 4th time that I almost died from my disease back in 2012, my doctors again explained, look, we've tried everything. There's nothing more to do. We've given you chemo. We tried this experimental drug. There's nothing else. I decided I would dedicate my life to trying to find a treatment for my disease.
Dr. Fajgenbaum's journey eventually led to a new way to approach how drugs could be used to treat diseases in surprising ways. And that would not be possible without AI. And that would not be possible without an ocean of data. And as we explore the intersection of AI and data, I think it's also important we take stock of this upside, the potential, and the promise of using richer, more granular data, how that can save lives and make our world better. That is our mission today on The People's AI, presented by the Vana Foundation. I'm your host, Jeff Wilser, a longtime journalist and a host of the AI Summit at Consensus. And I'm proud to partner with Vana to bring you this season of The People's AI. Vana is supporting the creation of a new internet, one rooted in data sovereignty and user ownership. Their mission is to create a decentralized data ecosystem where individuals, not corporations, govern their own data and share in the value it creates. Learn more at vana.org. So, to set the stage for this episode, I think it's fair to say that for the most part on season 3 of this podcast, we've been pretty critical about what can go wrong with respect to data and AI. We've asked some tough questions about how data is obtained by AI companies. We've looked at the exploitation of data laborers. We've considered what could go wrong and sideways when our data is misused and abused. And in my book, these are all totally fair questions to ask. These are questions we should be asking. But in the spirit of intellectual honesty, I think it's also to appreciate the other side of the coin, if you will. Or another way to put it, what's the point of all of this? Is it worth it as a society to invest in AI if all we're doing is just creating deepfake videos of Tom Cruise fighting Brad Pitt? Like, what's the point? So today, I want to focus on what's the point of it all? And in many ways, this is the point, or at least it is part of the point, or one of the big points. We now have the ability to collect mountains of data, often personalized, granular, like biometrics data. And we can glean insights from this like never before. That can create new drugs, that can personalize treatments, and that can help move the needle on things like climate change science, wildfire prevention, smart city planning, things like improving traffic flows. So there are 3 chapters or acts of the play to this episode. In the first, we'll look at a broad overview of the way these pools of data can help society. In the second, we'll go a bit deeper in the world of health and medicine. And in chapter 3, finally, we'll look at the overlooked role in data portability in all of this, and how when people have the ability to truly own their data and bring it from platform to platform, hospital to hospital, that creates an even richer pool of data that can spark more innovation. But first, To ground ourselves, let's get back to Dr. Fajgenbaum and how his big breakthrough came from a surprising place. Not really new drugs, but actually old drugs, generic drugs. After lots and lots of experimentation, it was a drug for organ transplant rejection, which was not his problem, that worked for his rare disease and saved his life. So he wondered, could he find solutions like that for other diseases at scale?
And I remember that they'd just given me a bunch of chemo for other diseases that had worked for me. And it didn't work long term, but it had saved my life. So I thought to myself, if these 7 chemotherapies that were made for other things could treat my disease, maybe there's an 8th drug out there that's made for another disease that could also save me. And I ended up discovering and really going on a journey over the next year to try to find one, but discovering a drug that was made for organ transplant rejection called sirolimus that I thought could work for my disease based on the experiments I was doing in the lab on my own blood samples. And I started testing it on myself. And Jeff, last month marked 12 years that I've been in remission on this drug that wasn't made for my disease, but that I was able to discover and then use the term to repurpose to save my life.
And part of this, or a large part of this, has to do with money, profit, the incentives drug companies have or don't have to create new drugs.
When a drug company is deciding what drugs to develop, what diseases to develop those drugs for, they are always going to maximize profit. That's what you do when you're a for-profit company with shareholders. So they're always going to ask the question, what's the most profitable new drug for what's the most profitable disease to take that new drug into? And if the disease affects 20 people around the world, it's unlikely that that's going to be the most profitable condition for that drug company to work on a new drug for. And so as a result, companies tend to work on more common diseases. It's not always the case. Some companies do spend significant resources and do go after rare diseases. They just don't tend to go after ultra rare diseases, but they'll go after rare diseases and typically charge very high prices because in order to maximize profit, let's say there's only 1,000 people in the world with the disease and you can treat all 1,000 of them, you might charge $1 million a year for treatment to therefore maximize your profit. That might be what a drug company would do. And that's a problem. However, because if it's a new drug, companies can charge what they want to charge or what the market will bear. Companies will still go after very rare diseases. Where I see the biggest problem in our system is that it's the drugs that are already approved, like the drug that's saving my life, sirolimus. That drug is very inexpensive. So a drug company may not want to go after a rare disease with a new drug, but they'll definitely not go after a rare disease with an old drug. Because once a drug is generic, many companies can come in and make copies of that drug, and the price of that drug will plummet. So 80% of the drugs that have been approved by the FDA are already generic, which means, again, they're not profitable. So we could find a new use for that medicine that could save tens of millions of lives, and it would not make any money for anyone in our health system. So the drugs that are at our CVS, like the one that saved my life that was at my CVS, no one in our whole system is incentivized to find new uses for those medicines. And we know that drugs can be useful in more ways than one because the average drug is already approved for 1.5 to 2 uses.
This is the key point. Drugs sometimes work on diseases they were not intended for. And we can now use AI to comb all the data and to try to find surprising matches, to use science to boost the odds of serendipity.
So we know drugs can be useful in new ways. There's great examples like Viagra. You probably heard about how it was first used for heart disease before its well-known use, erectile dysfunction, but it's also used for a rare pediatric lung disease. Kids were dying because they weren't getting enough blood flow to their lungs. They take Viagra, they can live full lives. And there are many more examples like that. But the problem is all those examples, those discoveries are made while the drug's on patent because there's no incentives for people to look for them after they're off patent. So connecting it back to my case, so my drug that saved my life, sirolimus, has been around for decades. It was made for organ transplantation. And of course, it saved my life. We've been able to save a lot of lives with it. And then I started a center here at Penn where we started looking at more rare inflammatory diseases and cancers. And we kept coming across new uses for medicines, drugs that are at our pharmacy that we could find that could treat another horrible rare disease that kids were dying from. We're now up to a total of 14 times we've repurposed a drug for a disease it wasn't intended for. Literally, we've saved thousands of lives with drugs that were sitting at our pharmacy. So about 3 years ago, my co-founders, Grant Mitchell and Tracy Sikora, and I we're thinking to ourselves, we've got this incredibly horrible situation in front of us, which is that there's drugs that could save lives and people that are suffering, but no one looking to match them, but also this incredible opportunity because for the first time ever, artificial intelligence would allow us to scan across every drug in every disease to understand what drugs could be useful in new diseases. And so we launched a nonprofit called Every Cure, and we had to be a nonprofit because it's not profitable to find new uses for old medicines. And we finally needed one player in our system that wasn't going to be driven by profit, that would be solely driven by impact. And so that's why we started this nonprofit, Every Cure, and we built this AI platform over the last 3 years to essentially scan the world's knowledge of every drug, every disease, every gene, every protein to identify the best new uses for medicine. So that way we can actually do the laboratory work and the clinical trials to prove them out in more patients.
Dr. Fajgenbaum is just one of many scientists using data and AI for the greater good.
There's a huge opportunity that we should, of course, approach cautiously as well, as you might imagine. But the opportunity is more and more we have data at scale at our fingertips. And if we can focus on turning that data into insights to guide some of the systems within the society and combine it with the best of our knowledge, we can get to solutions faster.
This is Dr. İlkay Altintas, Chief Data Science Officer of the San Diego Supercomputer Center. For decades, she has devoted her career to using data to solve scientific puzzles across a wide range of disciplines.
Our world right now, we have complex problems to solve. And how do we actually assimilate everything that we know together to get the solutions to those problems faster at the local scale, at the regional scale, at the global scale? These are really opportunities for AI to help us with, because that complexity can be reduced through AI. I think this environmental resilience and disaster resilience and risk management is actually an area that we could really effectively use AI. And these days, energy systems and grid optimization and how they actually get to different forms of energy and control across these different alternative resources. And like in general, all applications of the environment and science, like science actually is now going toward AI not just being an assistant to AI actually being a team member. So that can actually almost create its own hypotheses and its own discoveries.
Now, on our Zoom call, I could tell that İlkay is wearing an Oura Ring, one of those devices that track your sleep, your heart rate, your stress levels, your biometrics. And in fact, I was wearing one too. I'm wearing one right now. These rings are helping scientists. And in fact, during peak COVID, İlkay's research, fueled by granular personalized data, helped scientists understand how COVID works. And İlkay was part of that research.
I just took off my ring. This is a wearable ring. We all have though, right?
I got a matching Oura Ring as well here.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. So this is something we didn't have before, to actually observe a person at the individual scale. So we can actually understand an understanding of the disease or improve the understanding of the disease at the personal scale. And for instance, during COVID, the ring data was donated into a study by the wearers. The good thing about the ring, actually, you own your data and you can donate it. And one of the studies that I participated in was turning that into daily alerts and combining it with hospital surveys. So you can actually see how the disease onsets at the individual scale. If you think, in these pandemics or epidemics, you model spread at the societal scale, right? How it goes from a person to person, how it spreads. And then now AI-based systems like this at the individual scale gave us also the other part of it. Can we model also at the individual scale? And maybe if we bring these different scales together, there are more learnings to be had. Not everyone might go through a disease in the same way, or it can onset differently. So one of the things, for instance, we learned through that was what we refer to as asymptomatic, actually was symptomatic in terms of changes, small changes in the baseline of the individual that we would never have known otherwise.
When you drill deeper with more granular biometric data, you found there actually were symptoms. They were just harder to see at a high level.
Yes. So the system would actually take data from tens of thousands of individuals would turn that through that large-scale data system into a form that we can work and look at the data through AI, that there are differences in the baseline of the individuals within those cohort of tens of thousands, and then generate alerts. And when some of those people actually took then tests because their baselines were changing, we noticed they did not have symptomatic things that we would know about them having COVID, but they were actually positive.
Granular data help people detect COVID sooner. And granular data can lead to more personalized treatment, a more finely calibrated dosage of drugs, or even a completely customized drugs. İlkay appreciates the irony that doctors used to do this, in a sense, back in olden times, many moons ago.
I think can evolve in a direction of a lot more tailored to the individual. I almost think like, are we going back? Because, in the past, pharmacists sort of mix things for the patient.
Great point.
Are we going to a world to actually, AI assist that and make it a lot more targeted to the individual? So this is very exciting, of course, because why would a 250-pound athlete and 150-pound teenager would have the same dose of something, right?
Much of İlkay's work has focused on the science of wildfires and how better data can give us better predictions.
It helps to understand how fire behavior happens in the fire environment. It emerges from the interaction of biomass. So we call it fuels in the fire. So things that ignite, the weather, the terrain and topology, infrastructure around it, and human decisions, right? That sort of affects it. I mean, human decisions not at the fire management scale, but also like human systems, at how we actually build in that environment and how we behave. So all of these interact with the fire as a system and affects fire behavior in the long term. That's when a fire happens, when it happens, how it spreads and behaves, and what it actually hurts, right? It could be burning of infrastructure and homes, but it could also be the ecosystems that it actually damages and destructs around it. So why is this a data problem? Because historically, data is fragmented. All these systems have silos of data that's difficult to access, and also it's computationally expensive to integrate. So when we call it this maybe fire AI or fire data science, it's the action of bringing these pieces together and help us to move from these more retrospective analysis of what happened because we didn't have access instantly to these systems and we didn't understand what was going on while it was happening, towards more understanding in real time and also predicting so we can get ahead of it. So what is getting ahead of it? Before a fire, getting ahead of it is understanding risk. And to have those scenarios of where risk is and how we can mitigate and reduce that risk through some actions. So if we knew that and if we had better science to show us how those actions related to reduction of fire risk, which is possible by bringing these together and putting AI with science together to accelerate now at the levels we needed.
I'm going to be over my skis here. I'm imagining that a fire starts and the fire chief needs to decide, okay, I'm going to be very simplistic here. There's 360 degrees that it could possibly spread to. And so we need to dispatch our fire suppression tools to encircle the entire fire to help prevent the risk of it spreading further. But if better data leads to better modeling, predicting, but actually we're like 97% certain that the fire is going to go to the northwest in this direction, then instead of having a thin response encircling the whole thing, you would deploy your resources to the northwest and be more likely to suppress the fire. Am I getting that right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much a great scenario to go through, right? Because when the fire happens, first of all, can we detect that fast? But even before the fire happens, if we know the risk, can we actually start making some of those resource decisions based on scenarios? So we have those ready to go. It's disaster readiness. But at the same time, along with that is AI readiness, because what helps there is having the AIs to integrate into it so we can have those decisions guided by dynamic changes in the environment. Like if the weather is changing, that decision has to change a little bit. That's where AI becomes really useful.
İlkay also finds AI useful in optimizing traffic flows, in modeling the impact of climate change, in optimizing waste management. And I personally interviewed experts who are using AI and data to improve the efficiency of recycling and cooling office buildings more efficiently so it takes less energy. But let's get back to health and medicine, given the massive potential and lives at stake. Here's Dr. Fajgenbaum again.
Artificial intelligence allows a level of scale that no humans could ever think of. So I mentioned earlier, there are about 4,000 FDA-approved drugs, and there are about 18,000 human diseases. So if you wanted to try every drug to treat every disease, you would do it 75 million times. Now, us humans, we can never be like, okay, among propranolol for Castleman's and sirolimus for COVID, like you could never quantify the 75 million different possibilities in a way that you could compare them and be like, oh, wow, lidocaine for breast cancer. That's actually a great idea. We should pursue that further. There's no way humans could do that. So in this case, we're not replacing humans. We're just doing something that humans could never even conceptualize of doing with artificial intelligence. So that's step one. And in doing that and scoring every drug versus every disease, we're scanning across knowledge that humans have generated, studies that humans did. I'll share one example, a horrible cancer called angiosarcoma, where nearly everyone dies within a few years of diagnosis. Some researchers back in 2013 did a study where they looked at 5 tumors from patients with angiosarcoma, and 4 of those 5 tumors had increased expression of a protein called PD-L1. And what we know is that when tumors have increased PD-L1, they often respond to PD-1 inhibitors. But now fast forward 3 years in 2016, someone had done the study in 2013, now we're in 2016, and no one had made this observation and then taken that into patients. And so at that stage in 2016, no patient had ever been treated with a PD-1 inhibitor, even though someone did the study in 2013 to suggest that it might be useful. So here at our center, we did that. We treated the first patient that we're aware of. He's done really well. April, so in a couple of months, we'll mark 10 years that he's been in remission on this drug. Other patients have now gotten this drug. The reason I highlight it is because that kernel of knowledge that PD-L1 was increased in angiosarcoma was out there. And there was already knowledge that us humans had generated that if that's the case, that a PD-1 inhibitor could be useful. But no one is responsible for scanning across every drug and every disease to look for these quote unquote low-hanging fruit where there's something that could suggest a patient could benefit from a medicine. So for the first time, we're creating a system to leverage all of these little kernels that us humans are generating, but to look at a systems level and say, what drug for what disease can help the most patients?
Another scientist looking at the overall system is Dr. Marshall Runge, former dean of the University of Michigan Medical School and the author of the new book, The Great Healthcare Disruption.
I think this is really a game changer in healthcare that we need desperately. So I think first and foremost, we're facing a critical shortage of doctors, nurses, other healthcare providers, and we are just not training enough on the one hand. On the other hand, our population needs are growing exponentially in every area of health, particularly mental health, but also in every area of health. AI enables us to engage with and query very large databases, and in a way that no human could possibly even conceive of, much less do. And no group of 100 humans could do it.
Then there is something that sounds boring and mundane, but makes a huge difference to doctors. AI helping to slash paperwork, to cut through red tape, to give doctors more time back for patients.
There's a technology that's called ambient AI that is now wildly popular, ambient AI, that's wildly popular with clinicians. And during my 10 years plus of being dean and CEO of Michigan Medicine, there was no other decision that I made that got such a popular and positive response, because what ambient AI does, think of it as our conversation. It records everything. You ask the patient, is it okay? I still see patients. And as long as that's okay, and I've yet to have anybody say they would not want that to happen, it listens to our conversation. And what it provides is not just a transcript, but it provides a really high level and accurate medical note. Most physicians now are saving, who see a lot of patients in an ambulatory setting, they are saving 2-3 hours a day I mean, that's an enormous step forward.
And Dr. Runge is one of the many scientists very bullish on AI and drug discovery. And he points out this is already happening. Lives will be saved thanks to AI.
There are now several AI-derived drugs that are in phase 3 clinical trials. So that's quite advanced. What it does is it enables scientists to find drugs that have never been made and to hone them down based on what their characteristics are. So I know a good bit about this from my time on the Eli Lilly board where, maybe 3 years ago, they started experimenting with this. So to put it in context, Eli Lilly has millions of drugs that they know all about, most of which didn't ever make it to the market, but they know what their properties are, how long they're in the plasma, what their side effects are, et cetera. And that's correlated to their structural function, to their structure. So Lilly took all that information and put in additional information about what specific pathway it was trying to block or trying to enhance. And in their experiment, which actually, I believe, engaged the entire Midwest Google Cloud for about a day or two, a lot of computing power needed there, they found 5 new molecules for a particular problem, molecules that aren't present in nature, but could be made by a medicinal chemist. And that process, instead of taking 10 years, took 2 or 3 months. I mean, we have lots of illnesses that we don't have therapies for. And to get those therapies faster, less expensively, and more safely, I think lots of potential. So I'll bet you there are at least, I don't know how many, 15 or 20 AI-derived drugs in the pipeline.
AI is quickly becoming an expert at reading CAT scans, reading X-rays, reading MRIs. That could make healthcare more inclusive, especially in more rural areas that lack access to doctors. And there's one variable that can make all of this data analysis more effective: data portability. Or to get more concrete, think about your health records and how easy it is, or impossibly difficult, to take your records from one hospital to the next.
One term that gets tossed around a lot is called interoperability of healthcare records. And this is something that's been being pushed since 2010 or before, that healthcare records have to be talking to each other, but they don't. And there are reasons that doesn't happen. Some of it's technical. I think a lot of it is they don't really want to connect to each other. But AI can sit on top of that. So in our case here in Michigan, we have our main university hospital. We have a VA hospital the VA runs. Right now, the only way, if I'm a patient in the VA hospital and I have to come over for urgent surgery, the only information the surgeon in the main hospital can get is on paper. It's like a bunch of PDFs somebody Xeroxed and sent. We're going to be doing pilots on that very soon with a tremendous provider to see if we can't make that interoperability work between our VA and our main hospital.
And Dr. Runge says that if the patients themselves somehow own that data and had easy access to that data and can bring the data wherever they wanted, the system itself will be stronger. It will work better. And this has upside.
Big upside. And we have the technology to do that. And one of my pet concerns is about patient privacy and privacy of their protected health information. And so I would not compromise that in any way. But when you think about what could be done, and this won't be for everybody, but you could have biometric access, so a retinal scan. I think that with a sane approach, that can actually protect PHI. But more importantly, it can mean that your data, you go in the emergency room, if you're out, you're in a bad car wreck or you passed out or whatever, you can have a retinal scan and they have your information right away. So why would we not want to do that?
So I was looking for a guest who could speak fluently on data portability, and I realized the ideal expert is Vana's very own co-founder, Art Abal, who has been a champion of user-owned data for years. Now, in full disclosure, Vana is my presenting partner for the show, but frankly, there's a reason for that. I believe in their mission. Here's Art.
So data portability is actually a regulatory term. So a lot of folks, even in tech, don't really understand it as a term. So
it's a bad term. We need to rebrand it.
Very bad term. I would just call it like the ability to apply your data wherever you want. It sounds like a really basic concept that you assume that you have, but you actually don't. where it's like, if I've created data on one platform, I should be able to just use that data for my benefit on any other platform. And unfortunately, we haven't built the regulatory or technological systems to allow that to happen. So what happens is I create data on, say, a social media platform. I can't then take that data and port it to another social media platform so that I have a harmonious experience across all my social media. I literally have separate profiles of self on all of these different tools. And then when you combine it across different types of data, so you've got social data, health data, you might have data on your everyday meetings and calendars and logistics, you actually have a very rich profile of yourself that right now, in a world where we're trying to advance ourselves through AI and agentic use cases, could be incredibly valuable to creating something helpful for me. An example that we're working on with a partner that's building on Vana is the ability to combine your health tracker data with your calendar data so that you can quite accurately see which meetings create positive or negative spikes in your anxiety, in your heart rate indicators of wellness and well-being. So those sorts of things, I say it and you're like, yeah, doesn't that exist? And the answer is absolutely not. They exist by these like gated pipelines between these two different applications. And it's like, no, we need a universal portability system that allows me to just take my data anywhere.
You mentioned health, you mentioned social. What would you say are the most, currently the most non-portable or locked in industries or use cases, and where is the most opportunity?
That's a really good question. So I don't have much empirical data to back this up. This is just going from my gut, and I bet somebody who's researched more in this space will probably have greater insights. But just based on what I've been seeing, a lot of the health tracker APIs are very restricted, and they don't allow you to access the data without contacting that company. That's, to me, one of the most viscerally, almost offensive things in the data portability space. The fact that this data is my heart rate, it's my sleep patterns, and I can't just pick it up and put it into an application if I wanted to. I have to go and request it from that platform. I can't even access it via API in a seamless way. That's really kind of offensive to me.
It's literally you. It's like your heartbeat, your blood, your metrics.
Right. Social media data can be a little bit, people don't think about that in the same visceral context, but it's similar. And that's another area in which it's really quite gated. Very hard to access your own Twitter data, very hard to access TikTok data, Instagram data, because you have to go through a request process. And even once you access that, you don't have a structured way to use it. So that's essentially what data portability is. It's the ability to take that data that's been created on one platform, store it in such a way that is useful to a user, and then allow that user to permission it in a way that's useful to them as well. And that's basically what I think the world of data should look like.
I'm curious about the implications of this, because there's almost two levels. There's a level of principle and what's fair.
Yeah.
And there's a level of what's practical and how does it actually impact the world of AI and what we can build into systems. And so it seems to me pretty clear on basic fairness, if it's my data, I should have the ability to take it to whatever platform I want, right? But beyond kind of like the right and wrong of it, I'm guessing there are very real world consequences of if people are locked in. It feels like the overall system is less efficient in using less data than they could, right? So how would you kind of characterize or frame the potential for data being aggregated in this kind of ethical way? What are some of the benefits of that and how AI can advance further?
Efficiency is a really good word that you use there. And I think the current system is not optimal or efficient for creating new innovation, because the incumbents have so much power because they built so much of this data within their walls that they can continue to iterate and innovate on this data itself. It means that folks that have cool ideas or have great technology that would benefit from access to this data cannot grow as fast as these incumbents. And back when I was in policy school, we always talked about antitrust and the era of big tech. And I think that one of the cornerstones of monopolization or oligopolization in big tech is that they have control over these data silos. I'm imagining a world in which they can still have copies of the data within their silos, but so can everyone else. And so can we then contribute it to technology that we actually want to see being brought into the world. And it will level the playing field for innovation so that new entrants can come in and really create products that cater for us. It will also, and this is probably why there's a lot of pushback, it may also affect negatively businesses' bottom lines that use that data as capital moat to say that I'm going to be able to do something with it later. I don't think that's an appropriate thing to do with people's data. It's not the businesses, we create it. And so I think that there will be pushback from folks that are like, no, I'm going to keep this wall up because that's how I maintain my business. That's not how they should maintain their business. They should maintain their business by providing an excellent service to us as users and customers. And right now they're maintaining their business by excluding us from being able to utilize this very valuable resource across the internet.
Tell us a bit about what Vana is doing to help facilitate this data portability and to help kind of unlock its potential.
Yeah, I mean, the protocol is built for portability. There's a couple of rules of the game that you need to have in order for data portability to really proliferate. One, it needs to be neutral. It needs to be kind of like the internet. And having a decentralized protocol is the best way to keep things neutral, to make sure that portability isn't gated in any way and users are allowed to take their data with them wherever they so choose. The second thing that Vana provides is a mix between private and public data. A lot of the portability protocols today focus only on public data because it's the easiest to be able to port around. Vana, because it's a self-custodial system as well as a decentralized protocol, basically means that you as a user can take your data and store it securely somewhere that you think is safe, and the protocol allows you to then permission that data securely to other applications that you think are suitable for that data. A lot of the existing solutions aren't able to grapple with this idea of like my data and sharing, but the Vana protocol allows that to happen. And then beyond that, we're partnering with folks in enterprise to actually make this reality exist. So allowing users to be able to generate these experiences with their data. So it's kind of like show, not tell, where you can actually take your data into the experience. One that I mentioned before, which is allowing you to be able to get insight on which meetings create most anxiety for you. That's amazing. And a lot of users will start to realize, oh, wow, this is actually something that's quite powerful. And I think that user education piece is part of the reason why we don't have data portability today. We've been kind of taught that it can't happen. So we limit our ideas of creativity to what we can actually achieve.
I'd like to close by swinging back around to Dr. David Fajgenbaum and to get back to his journey with searching for surprising, even weird matches between generic drugs and other diseases. Thanks to their depth of data and the speed of AI, they've made connections that brute force human trial and error would likely never have stumbled upon.
Yeah, a couple that really stand out to me. So one of them is Botox for major depressive disorder. So that was one of our highest scoring matches. It was like a 0.99 something. Essentially, the data that exists suggests that doing a Botox injection in one particular place of your forehead, a globular injection, has been shown actually in clinical data to improve mood and also reduce major depressive disorder symptoms for 3 to 4 months. And the thought is that there's some bidirectional feedback between the muscles in your face and your brain, and that by relaxing the muscles in one part of your face, that actually sends a signal back to your brain to maybe feel a certain way. And there's more work to be done, but that one really stood out to us. Another repurposing idea that we sort of had never thought about and was surprising to learn about was lidocaine injection for breast cancer. So injecting lidocaine around, lidocaine, the numbing medicine you might get if you go to the dentist, but it's also used in all surgical procedures, injecting that numbing medicine around the tumor. And amazingly, a group in India did a large clinical trial where they showed that if you inject lidocaine around a tumor before you resect the breast, that you can reduce the risk of recurrence and mortality at 5 years by 29%. And the belief and the thought is that maybe that's working because during the act of surgery, when you start to cut open the region, a number of those cancer cells become quite migratory. So whether it's through the lymphatics or through the blood vessels, those cancer cells will sometimes move out of the surgical space. But if you can inject lidocaine around the area, you can make them less migratory, essentially keep them in one place. You resect the tumor. And we think that might be why the outcomes are better. But what's really exciting about what we're doing is that we're looking at clinical endpoints. You know, what drug did this person get exposed to and did they have a better outcome? And then we're trying to understand why that might be the case and do further research to prove these things actually work.
But let's get even bolder. What could the future of health look like if progress keeps advancing and if we get more and more granular, personalized data that could be, while preserving privacy, with data portability, used to improve all of our health outcomes. When Dr. Fajgenbaum was 25 years old, he nearly died from mystery disease. He solved that. He's using AI to help cure other diseases with old generic drugs. And now he is bullish about where all of this is headed.
I don't know how many years from now this will be, but I think in the not too distant future, I think that there'll be enough data collected on us, whether it's ambient listening from the Siris or the Alexas around us, and also video, that some of that research I described on basically being able to diagnose someone with the disease before they've even talked to their doctor, I think that'll go back into the home. And so I think that you will be able to make a diagnosis on something that you or I might have in the home based on data on our voice changes, data on our movement, lots of data, make a diagnosis and essentially deliver a drug to you before you've ever needed to see a doctor. And it's because the diagnosis is made. It's because it's very clear that this drug is going to work for that disease. And then you're going to get it, dropped to your house, by a drone, and start taking it before you ever even want to see a doctor. That's I think where we're heading to. And I think that part of the reason that's possible is, as you said earlier, there's so much data being generated and available. I think part of it also is that, up until the creation of every cure, all artificial intelligence work was going towards brand new drug development. And so we are coming up with amazing new drugs, but those amazing new drugs take 10 to 15 years to get them approved, to do the laboratory work, to do the study in humans. And so we're not going to see the sort of the fruit of that hard work for literally decades. But with every cure, we're actually looking at all the stuff we've already got. And artificial intelligence is particularly good at using existing data and looking for patterns in existing data sets to figure out how it can be useful in new ways. And so though we've spent all of our time and attention as a biomedical system on AI for new drug development, which is going to pay off 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now, we now have a use case where we're actually unleashing AI on all of our existing drugs and our existing data to help existing patients with existing diseases, but that I think is going to help a lot of people in the near term. So I'm really, really bullish about that.
Well, there you have it. Thank you again to our guest, Dr. David Fajgenbaum of the University of Pennsylvania and co-founder of Every Cure, to Dr. İlkay Altintes of UC San Diego, to Dr. Marshall Runge, former dean of University of Michigan Medical School and the author of the new book, The Great Healthcare Disruption, and to Art Abal, co-founder of Vana. Speaking of, thank you again to my partner, the Vana Foundation. Vana is supporting the creation of a new internet, one rooted in data sovereignty, user ownership, and yes, data portability. Their mission is to create a decentralized data ecosystem where individuals, not corporations, govern their own data and share in the value it creates. Learn more at vana.org. Thank you to Bradford Craig for our sound design and music. Thank you to Kate Morgan for research and producing, and research in more ways than one. Kate wrote an amazing article for the New York Times a while back featuring Dr. Fajgenbaum and shedding light on the story. So thanks to Kate for these connections and ideas. And thank you to Jasper Chua for creating our videos on YouTube. If this is your first time to People's AI, please subscribe, share it on social, send to a friend. Thanks again, and see you next time.